whatever. And you send
There it goes. It just said recording in progress. Admit. There we go. We'll wait like 1 minute. Morning, Kimberly.
Good morning.
Chip, good to see you here. I'm sure you're at work as well.
Good morning, I am.
Okay. So I will leave it up to lots of questions. I made a list of some things that we talked about on Tuesday, and I will go through those things and stop me, ask me questions. Again, this is not meant to be a Photoshop class, like we're teaching a class. Again, this was Kimberly and I were talking a lot about Photoshop and editing. And so I just wanted to kind of address some of those things. So this is going to be a conversation. So let's keep it that way. Go ahead and just stop me. I use exclusively Photoshop. I don't even have Lightroom on my computer.
Oh, shame on you.
What's that?
Shame on you.
Yeah. I've tried to a number of times. It's just, to me, there's too many tools that are missing. And again, I don't expect that from people. I've been using Photoshop for a long time. I've taught it. I've, know lots of extra techniques over years and years of doing it and hours of doing it. So I think Lightroom's a great product. I'm not anti-Lightroom. I just don't have the tools I need in it. And it's one of those things of sometimes you can't mess up your workflow if the workflow works for you. But if you know kind of the history of Lightroom, Lightroom is Bridge, Camera Raw, Photoshop. They've taken the parts that they said we think photographers need and created a product that, rather than go from panel to panel to panel, they just put it all into one product and you just go tab to tab. But it's so much of it. Everything that is in Lightroom is in Photoshop. Everything that's in Photoshop is not in Lightroom. And that's okay, because there's a lot of things in Photoshop I will never use and you will never use, because it's not just made for photographers.
It's complex.
It's very complex because it's made for different types of users. It's made for graphic artists, it's made for cartoonists, it's made for photographers, it's made anybody that works with a raster image. That's what it was made for. And so here's what I think is the most important thing with Photoshop. Oop, I got to remember, you got her good. Is in Photoshop, I equate it to editing your photo to cooking. Here's what's happened. Have you ever met somebody that's gone to culinary school? My aunt and uncle own a winery in the Napa Valley. She is a phenomenal chef. She went to culinary school. She blows me away when I watch her cook. You know why? I've never seen her pull out a recipe book in her life. And she's like, I really don't have many recipes. She said, I went to culinary school. I learned how to cook. So when she wants to make dinner, she doesn't go, let me go look through my recipes. No, she learned the techniques at culinary school. And now she goes in her cupboard and she says, I've got some flour. I've got some of this seasoning. Oh, I have some chicken left over in the fridge. And she goes, I'm going to make dumplings. And then she just starts making them because she knows how to put them together. This is the problem. What's happened in Photoshop and in post-processing is everybody wants to learn a recipe. Every picture's different. So we all have different ingredients. You can't follow the directions. So that's what happens. You watch somebody do something and you go, I put the exact numbers they told me to put in, and it doesn't look like their image, because that doesn't work. So my thing is with Photoshop, with Lightroom, you need to learn techniques. It's probably the same Tim would tell you with painting. Everybody has a different style, but man, people all learn the same technique. And then it's what techniques you add and which ones you use and you don't use. And you can have a totally different looking painting than someone else, but you still need to learn those fundamental things. Like so many people don't know how to use the pen tool in Photoshop. And it's just because they go, it looks too hard. Well, it's very easy to use. It takes a little bit of trying, but it's a technique that I use to mask things out, to select edges, and it selects it better than any way possible. We're not going to talk about the pen tool probably today, but I just as an example. So here's what I was thinking earlier today is we've asked us in our workshops, what makes a dramatic photo?
Light.
Okay.
Shadows.
What's that, Judy?
Shadows.
Shadows, right? Yes, you have to have light to make an image, but what makes a image that pops is shadow. Because we always say there's no shadow, there's no drama. And this came about with a conversation Kim and I had in the car of looking at images and going like, why don't these pop, these images? Well, a lot of photographers today, their style, because of we've been all influenced by Instagram, is a very light, airy, bright. That's the way we describe these photos. There's no shadows. It's all open. It's all midtones and highlights. And so there's no drama. And if you have no drama, you can't make a picture pop. You can make it look soft. You can make it look elegant. You can make it, you can add a bunch of words, but you're never going to say, wow, that's a dramatic image, because there is no drama. There is no shadow. There's only midtones and highlights. So I think that's an important technique to understand. There's nothing wrong, as photographers, we have to know how to make all styles of images these days, simply because that's what clients want. You're going to shoot a wedding, you're going to shoot senior portraits, shoot your style, but also be aware that if no one's hiring you, it may be because, oh, I can't do some of the things they want me to do. And that's not, again, this is a weird conversation, me sounding like in one way I'm saying edit like you edit, but also be aware that you might have to shoot some other style you don't want to shoot. I'm kind of saying that. Just say, be aware. So with that, let's just go ahead and we'll start looking at pictures. We'll start doing some things. So I'm going to move you guys over here and I'm going to share my screen. All right. Are you guys looking at Bridge, this right here, where you see a bunch of images?
Yes.
Okay. Let me move you to my other screen where I can see all of you. Takes me a second to kind of stretch you all out.
Well, then I'm getting up and I'm saying, you don't have to. You say, I went, yeah, I am. If you're out here, I'm just as tired as you, and you worked hard.
Okay, Eddie, you're really loud.
So we were out there in about 45 minutes.
There you go. All right. So I have the images up from when we shot the other day in San Francisco. And I actually added a couple extra images here that I wanted to put in for just different things I want to talk about today. So let's talk really quickly just about adjusting an image in Camera Raw or adjusting it in Lightroom. So I'm in Bridge. I love Bridge. Bridge, I think for me is the easiest way to find images, look at images. If you've never looked at Bridge before, I actually have a video you can search on our channel where I go in depth on why I use Bridge and how I use it. But to me, I think it's so much more of a powerful way to find things. And again, if all you do is photography, Lightroom probably is all you will ever need. I do video. I do, make albums sometimes. I, work on PDFs, all kinds of things. Every type of image and file basically known can be seen in Bridge. That's why they call it Bridge, because it bridges everything. If I have video files, I can find them in Bridge and I'll see them, I can watch them, and I can drag them over into Premiere Pro if I'm editing a video. These take me right into Photoshop. If I have a vector image, like a logo, I can double click on those and those will take me right into Illustrator. And then I'm working in the right product for working on vector images. So for me, I use different types of images. I like it. I think it's fast to find things because there's no, you can create, what do they call them? Collections, but I don't ever use collections. And most people that I talk to don't use collections in Lightroom either. but this is just a file finder. It just reads whatever on your computer. If I plug a hard drive in, like right now, you can see up top here, it says this computer, new volume D, that's an external hard drive, and Chinatown Ballet is the name of that file. It just reads that. I unplug it, it disappears. I plug in another thumb drive. I can now read the thumb drive, see the images. I don't have to import them. I don't have to go find them and say add them to the collection. None of that. I just read what's on my screen. But a couple things I love about it is I love all the filters, which Lightroom has filters as well. But things like this, orientation. If any of you have ever made photo books or anything, a lot of times I'll go, okay, I need a landscape image. So I can click and say, just show me the landscape images in this folder. And then I can just find the one that I think is going to fit in that book. I can look it up by when it was created. I can look at it, what lens was used, all kinds of things. So, and I can create, if you like collections, you can do that. And if you want to export right to different things like social media, you can add those in there as well. But so I use Bridge. All I'm going to do is double click on this image right here, and it's going to bring me up into Camera Raw. Camera Raw is Lightroom. Just think of it. It's a lot of people can get confused because they're like, see, well, I use Lightroom. It's one product. You're like going from Bridge to Camera Raw to Photoshop. There's all these different products that you're using. I can't open an image in Photoshop without a Camera Raw editor. And it just automatically does that. Photoshop, you don't have to say do it. Photoshop just does it. Photoshop says, you cannot come into my space until you turn this into a Photoshop image. So just lots of things go on behind the scenes that we don't think about. And I always think they're important. A lot of people just get glazed over and they're like, I don't need to know that. Like, did you know in Lightroom, in Photoshop, a raw file, people always go, you can't edit a raw file. It's true. When you open up an image in Lightroom or you open up an image in Photoshop, you are looking at a native Photoshop file. What it does is it's taking the raw file and converting it, it's uncompressing it and turning it into a Photoshop file. That's why you go, hey, I have a 48, a 24 megapixel camera. Then I look down here and it says 24 megapixels. But when I open up into Photoshop, you ever look at your images at the bottom and you go, why does it say like 78 megapixels? Because even a raw file is compressed. It uncompresses it and it puts it in a format that can be worked on. So that's what's happening within this. But I wanted to bring up an image different from what we did the other day, just simply because this one's got a lot of just different things going on in it. And I thought this is a great one. You'll find Steve and I have very similar styles when we edit like weddings and things together. Like lots of times we can't even tell the difference between each other's photos. And I think it's this step. You notice right here, doesn't this look just like your Lightroom? It's because it's the exact same thing. Instead of in Lightroom, you have tabs that go across to choose. I have tabs, little buttons up here that get me to the exact same panels that you have in Lightroom. So one of the first things that I always do, and I know Steve does as well, in Lightroom, I think, is the word auto still in there? Or do you guys call it?
Yeah, it's auto.
Yeah, it's called auto. Man, the first thing I do with an image is I always say auto, and I see what Adobe thinks should happen to this image. Like that's always my starting point. This one was a very underexposed on purpose to keep the clouds. But most times you will find when you hit auto, you'll go, oh no, I don't like it. It's just simply because this is what Photoshop or Adobe gets wrong, I think, every time, is the exposure slider. If it's a little bit underexposed, like lots of dark in it, it'll always underexpose it. If it's exposed perfectly and it sees anything interesting in it, most of the time it looks like something like this and it overexposes. All these other sliders, man, it did a fantastic job. A lot of times I just double click on the slider. Did you guys know if you double click on these little buttons, even in Lightroom, it'll zero them out?
Yep.
And so I always go, no, let me choose everything else. And I can turn the auto off and on and I can kind of see what it's doing. And I like looking at kind of what these sliders are doing. But here's where I think a lot of the magic happens that people mess up in. And here's what I see the most. The biggest problem I see is someone will take an image. Let me cancel this really fast. Let me find a easier. No, I don't want to save anything. Oh, yes, I do. Say cancel. Yes, don't show this again. Is here, this is a great image from the other day. And I've left this in here because this is a good example of a bad photo. Number one, here's the problem. Here's a technique. Anytime I watch people work on Photoshop, I see them looking at a picture like this. And they're like, yeah, I'm trying to get her looking right. And so they go, my highlights are just so high. So I bring this down so I lose so I start getting detail in my highlights. Number one, here's where the technique comes in. You're working about this the wrong way. Unless you have a magnifying glass or you're working inches off your screen, how do you know what's going on with her? Don't be afraid to zoom in on your subject. So there's my subject, right? Why do I want to work on her that small when I can work on her right here? So whenever I'm working on a person, I always zoom right in because that's all that's important. So I hit the auto button and I go, wow, you really think this should be that bright? And maybe I'll start pulling down this until I start seeing my detail. Contrast is another thing. Contrast I can add at any point. Contrast, a lot of people go, yeah, but I like how it's giving contrast. I actually usually pull the contrast down simply because it brings things closer together. All contrast does in Photoshop is it looks for where light and dark pixels meet, and then it starts darkening the pixels right on that edge. So it's kind of like an edge detection, and then it starts, the more you put on it, the wider that edge gets of darkness. So it's actually working on a pixel level. I like to bring that down a little bit, not because I don't like contrast, because I have all these sliders to put in contrast in. Then I can start working only on her, and I'll look at my highlights. But here's what I was going to say. A lot of people do this. They go, oh, look at all the detail I'm getting in my highlights. And then they start going like this. Oh, I'm losing some detail, in my shadows. Oh, I need to look at all the details in my shadows. And then, or in my blacks. And then they go, oh, nope, shadows. Boy, look at, if I brighten it up, I really see it. Okay. And then they end up with an image that looks like this to start with. Does that have drama? That all you did was say, I'm going to bring the highlights, the midtones, the shadows, everything into the center, and I'm going to make detail in everything. Well, there's no drama in detail. I mean, there is, but here you've just kind of muddied everything. You ever looked at somebody's skin and went, that's kind of a muddy looking picture? It's because they've just forsaken technique number one is contrast. You must have contrast. So, rather than go, oh, but I'm losing a tiny bit of detail if I brighten this up. Well, I need those highlights. What do I care if this little tiny strip has less detail than this little strip right here? So I'll start moving around my white sliders and I'll go, wow, how much can I actually add? Not at what point do I go, oh, it's too bright. Oh, that's everything. No, I start going and I'll go, wow, there's some good highlights now. I'll go into my shadows and I'll start pulling that down and I'll start looking at the darkest spot, like down under her arm here. And I'm not looking for the details. I'm just looking for at what point can I say, well, I can live with that. So suddenly now I bring this down and I go, okay, I've darkened that up. I'm going to bring my darks. I'm kind of looking at the little round spot on her elbow. And I just kind of move this back and forth. And again, I'm teaching through this. This all happens in just seconds. Once you do this for a while, you don't even really think about it. And at this point, I may, play with my slider here, but see how I can gain detail by getting rid of contrast. And if I feel like, wow, that's just doing weird things, then I start adjusting these other sliders instead of the contrast. I create the contrast here because I go, ooh, I want to keep some detail in this hair. So I brighten that up and I'll bring this down and I just kind of keep playing with it. And then I'll go, okay, there, now she kind of pops. The problem is that, you know, we did this on a bad time of day. This was our first shot of the day, and there was all of these shadows here, and they just did not work. I may bring up my exposure, but a lot of times there's nothing I can do, but that's my starting point. I want to talk about, these are two important sliders, and you have these also, right? You have texture and clarity and dehaze in Lightroom. These first two right here are so important. I want to show them to you now, and then we'll come back to them, because I'm going to show you in a little while frequency separation. And I picked this image not to make it look good, because there's not a lot I can do with it. I mean, I can work really hard, but it's a busy image to begin with. It's kind of a waste of time. I just wanted, I needed an image that had some really bright spots that I could show you how to create it, why people create muddy images. But these two things right here are two very important sliders. These are your frequency separation sliders. And we'll talk about frequency separation here in a minute, but let's pull up really quickly. These ones here. When we talk about frequency separation, all it means is that you're separating, I'll go deeper in a second, you're separating the details on one layer and the color on another layer. So I can either work on the colors or I can work on the details. This image is a great image because she did this weird thing with her makeup where she was trying to contour herself. Brittany, I'm waiting for the palm slap, you know, and when I got home, I'm looking at this weird line here and I'm going, what it is she's got this color and then she's got this light color and dark color. So it's created these stripes of color. I can separate now and blend those colors together, but not affect any of these little details because they're on their own layer when we do frequency separation. But here's what's cool. Clarity is your, what they call the low pass layer. This is your color layer. Watch what happens when I slide this. You see how the color all the way over here now got brighter, darker, brighter, like it got more pronounced. And a lot of people go, no, it's putting detail in. And as I bring it down, it starts mushing those colors together. I'll use this as to give myself contrast. I'll use clarity because it's color contrast. But then the texture is the details. It does not affect the colors. And if I move the texture here, see all these little lines, they're getting just darker because it's adding more, you know, luminance to those pixels. If I slide it to the left though, see how they're all softening? So I actually can do a lot of my work fixing skin right here. You guys can do it in Lightroom before, you know, not having to do some sort of like, ooh, then I got to take it and do this smooth softening technique. You can do most of it. If somebody has good skin, it can all be done here. You give it a little clarity and then you pull down that texture and look at how much better that looks. I mean, versus here's how we started. Give it a little contrast, bring that down a little bit. And then I just kind of feather that off. See how much better her skin already is looking. And it's not really affecting too many other things. So that's the poor man's way of doing frequency separation. I still use frequency separation, but understanding that those aren't just sliders that you go, well, if I move to the right, I get more detail. Yeah, you do, but you've also don't know what's happening to the color layer, which is nothing. And so now you can go, oh, now I can give contrast to the color, or I can blend the color. I can give contrast to the details, or I can take contrast away from the details. So again, just techniques, and it's not a matter of writing down, oh, Mark went to 16 and 53. I mean, those are big numbers. I almost never go that much. She had such wild makeup. So it's not a matter of memorizing numbers. It's a matter of just getting in there. And you can't look at a picture like this and try to adjust these. You have to look at the picture like this and adjust those. The same thing where people say, oh yeah, I'm going to do my sharpening now, right? So they come here and they say, well, I'm going to run up my sharpening. Wow, I really don't see it sharpening. That's because you're sharpening like that. Hopefully all of you are sharpening like this. Come in to see what's important, right? Here's no sharpening. Here's, a lot of sharpening. And when I sharpen, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the noise. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to find somewhere that has noise, digital noise. I'm not trying to get rid of it all. I could, see, and then it just starts getting all blended and yucky. But I'm going to move this thing and until I kind of go, it's getting too soft. And then I back it off a little bit. But you notice I'm working in at this level, not at this level. So again, it's all about techniques. And again, a lot of people, they go, I don't even sharpen because I don't see it sharpening. Of course you don't see it sharpening because you're looking at a tiny little image. So you have to learn to zoom in. Any questions?
Mark, you just zoom in 100% or more?
I don't know. I actually have mine set, and you can do it in Lightroom too, to where when I click, I drag to the right, I zoom in, I drag to the left. I don't look at numbers. I just click and I drag in to where I want to work at. What am I at? I'm at 492% right there. If you go too far, then it just turns into pixels. So a lot of times I'll go to where it's pixels, looks pixely, and I'll just back off. But yeah, zoom in and find where you're working. That's what's important.
Thank you.
Yep. I'm going to say open on that one. Go back here, and there was another image. Oh, so here again, I'm going to open this one because this is all about technique. Hit cancel. If I hit my tab bar in Bridge, it brings me to a full screen view of it. Somebody tell me what they see in this image. Where is your eye looking? Is anybody just looking at her?
Drawn to the
There's a-
banners.
The
Yeah,
banner's
the
a little
red,
bright.
yeah, too red.
I'll tell you where my eye's drawn. This white thing by her face, this white door jamb, this light stuff on the ground. And then I look at her, and then I look at the white thing, then I look at this long door jamb, and then I don't really pay attention as much to her. I just kind of go, yeah, there's a ballerina there, but there's all this stuff and my eyes going around, and not in a good way because I can't focus on her. Here's my edit later, it's not, this is not a good photo, but I just thought this is a great example of, okay, your eye looks at the door jamb, your eye looks at that little white thing by her head. Now, where does your eye look? Looks right at her face. Because here's what the technique says that we talked about. Contrast or shadows create drama. Your eye is always drawn to the brightest point in the image. If you're shooting a picture of a person, they should be the brightest point in the image. If there's something brighter in the image, that's your subject. That's where people are going to look. People are not going to look. They are going to notice your person, but they're going to be going, oh, look at that bright piece of sky. Ooh, look at that white car in the background. Ooh, look at this. Look at this. And they go, yeah, it's okay. And you can't figure out why. It's because they're not the subject. Other things are. Again, whoop. In this picture, she's not the subject. The alley of Chinatown's the subject. Because I'm looking at door jambs and red banners and bright floors and notices on doorways. And you might go, yeah, but I love the details. Fantastic. Love the details. And we're not talking in this lesson about, reportage or reportage or however you want to say it. We're talking about portraits, and in portraits, the subject is what's important. So you've got to learn to, and this is where techniques come in great, because you might look at that image. And again, I don't think this is a great image. I think it's just a good example. You may look at it and go, oh, I don't like the toning you did on her. That's fine. I'm going to show you how to do toning. You choose the toning you like. Maybe you like it warmer. I like things on a bluer side of things. And you might be somebody that goes, I hate the color blue toning things. I love orange. I love yellow. I love red. I love green. This is where it all comes in. We all should be using the same techniques, but coming up with different art. So by learning those things. So I'll just hit my tab bar. So make sure that when you start approaching your edits, that you just go, okay, what's bad in here that I need to either get rid of, and why you need to edit. Steve and I do this all the time. We do the palm slap. And when somebody goes, yeah, I didn't really like my images. I didn't even edit through them. Editing your images where you learn how to take pictures. You know why? Because if I went to Chinatown and I came home with all my images looking like this, and I had to sit there and cut things out and do all this kind of stuff, the next time I go to Chinatown, guess what? I am not putting white door jambs in there. I'm going to be very aware of my angles, very aware of, a lot of times people are like, I don't really care. That white thing up there doesn't bother me. Well, then guess what? You've not edited photos, because that should drive you insane. It should like make you angry that you did that, but there's nothing I could have done to get rid of it other than go, okay, I got to get rid of it. But man, this is an easy fix, a door jam, right? All I had to do was move my camera to the right some more, but then she would have been shifted to the left. So guess what? I couldn't, because there was people or there was a light post. The next time I'm going to step to my left and I'm going to shoot at a different angle. But so editing teaches you how to take pictures better. So let's go into Photoshop. If you don't use Photoshop a lot, I guarantee you your Photoshop looks like this. And Photoshop gets really scary because you're like, man, it's got all these tools. It's got all this stuff over here that I don't know what this canvas stuff means. And I don't understand these rulers and grids. That's because the top right of Photoshop, you've got this little drop down. You have it in every Adobe product. See how it says essentials? These are like Adobe says, we think these are the most important tools everybody should have up to start with, which makes no sense. But then they go, if you're a 3D artist, here's the ones we think you need. If you're a graphics and web designer, we think you work with a lot of, text and things. So we're going to give you all the text tools. Go down here and say photography. Say, I'm a photographer. I want the photography tools. And suddenly now I've got the tools that I need at my disposal. All these can be done underneath Windows. You can click any of these and they'll pop up. Like Photoshop just upgraded. And so when it upgraded, a lot of times I lose how this is set up. So I have to go back through, like I always have the character panel set up for myself because I do a lot of text, which these are my text tools. But anyways, so here's Photoshop, set it up with the photography tools. And I believe, let's look at this. Yeah, so notice these tools on the left-hand side. This is all set up for motion, for doing, you can edit video inside of Photoshop. I wouldn't advise it. It's easy to do, but there's if you don't have an editor, you can edit inside here. But look, when I click photography, watch those tools on the left-hand side. See how they changed? Mm-hmm. Some of them stayed the same, but it gave me different tools because Photoshop said, here's the tools. Again, it's all about the right tools. So what I want to talk about was frequency separation. And this is a good one. I chose this because she's got stray hairs right here. She's got this weird thing going on with her makeup, all kinds of things. So frequency separation, like I said, is a way to separate things out. I'll give you a link, two links. I'm going to give you a link to download the exact same action file that I'm using. And I'll try to give you a link to some videos to watch. I was telling Kimberly in the van the other day is Pix Imperfect. There's a little Indian guy, Dinesh, best Photoshop teacher ever. And all the things I'm teaching, man, there's so many things that he does such a good job, in depth, doesn't miss a step, very, very plain spoken, like anybody can follow along. You got to be watching Pix Imperfect. Anytime you have something, go to his YouTube channel and search it. Just be like, oh, I can't figure out how to Photoshop makeup. Go to Pix Imperfect's YouTube page and search his YouTube channel and search makeup. Guarantee you he's got how to do digital makeup. And he'll give you 20 different techniques on how to do it. But so I am not going to teach you what's going on inside of frequency separation, but rather how to use it. So see this, see it says picks. This is actually his. I've used different ones. He's got the very best one. I last year switched to his action file. Action files, right? Just make things happen in Photoshop on its own. I have Florabella actions that are my favorites, but I don't use a lot, but this one especially. So here's this frequency separation. I'll give you the link to it. Download this, install it. They're easy to install. You go to your you go to your actions panel, this little bars here, little 4 bars, you say load action. Where does it say load action? Right here, load action. You go to like where you downloaded it to, you select it and you hit load and it pops up in this list. Actions are not hard to load. They're super easy. Anybody can do it. His is set up with a 16-bit and a 8-bit. And if you're doing a black and white image. So I'm editing everything in 8-bit. I don't edit in 16. I will edit in 16-bit, but very rarely. It's very slow.
Yeah, what's the difference? Because that's always been a puzzle in my mind of, am I doing the wrong one?
Are you a fine art photographer and you're putting stuff in a museum and people are coming up with a magnifying glass, then edit in 8-bit, 16-bit.
Okay.
Pretty much everything you're doing is in 8-bit. And that's what everybody else is seeing. It's you can't see 16-bit. You just know it's there. It's the difference is the gamut, your color gamut, instead of having whatever it is, 30 million colors, you have 4 billion colors, degrees of color. But your monitor can't see it, your eyes can't see it, but there is differences printing and not printing portraits. We're talking high end, and it gives you like more pixels to move around. So there's really not any reason to work in 16-bit. So I just use 8-bit. If you want to, then you choose 16-bit. I'm working in 8-bit and I just hit the play button. And what'll happen, it's doing it all for me. It's going to stop at some point and it's going to say, does this look like it's blurred? And 90% of the time, I'm just going to say, okay. Sometimes I'll have an image, like if I'm really close to a face and they have really bad skin, I'll see like these dark spots where they had really bad acne. And I might move it up to somewhere around 11 or 12 to kind of blend things together, but I'll just leave it and say, okay. And it's done its thing. Here's what it did. It loaded high frequency and low frequency. If I turn it off and on, you'll not see anything happen. So remember I said low frequency, this is your color. High frequency is your details. What it is these two together equal my original image. And I'll show you what I mean by that. If I get rid of the high frequency, the details, there's a layer of just colors. Once I throw the details back on, it draws the lines in, it puts it's basically the luminance, how light and how dark the pixels are. If I turn the color off, which is the hue layer or the hue and saturation part of the pixel, all I see is the details. There's no color. You can kind of see it looks like color in here, but there's really no color. This is just how light and how dark the pixels are. It'll appear to your brain to have some color because your brain will. You ever seen those things on Photoshop or on Facebook where they're like, stare at this, and then all of a sudden you look at another picture and it's black and white just because your brain got fooled into thinking things. That's what's happening here. Your brain says, yeah, lips are red, so I'm going to start filling this in. My brain will start putting color in when there's no color. If I showed you this without showing you that, you would just see this as pretty much a grayscale image. So here's what's happening. When you put those two together, it creates this lower level. This is the way, hands down, the way to touch up images, to touch up blemishes in skin. Again, sometimes we have people, like our last workshop, we laughed about this at the winery, is we had 4 models there. And I think with those 4 models, I don't think I've seen a single blemish on anybody. Like there was nothing to do. You can go into those skin softening actions, or you can go into Luminar and go, whoop, just move a little slider and their skin's flawless. But most of the time you don't have that. And there's also times of just knowing what you're doing with these photos. Like I didn't do this. I did this to like 2 images from the ballerina shoot the other day. And I will slowly go back through and I will edit heavier some of those pictures that I like. But most of them, I just did slider adjustments inside of Camera Raw, and that was done. And then I just turned them into JPEGs. But this is the way you're going to fix images. So here's the most common thing, right, is stray hairs. And most of you, I'm going to turn this off, and I'll do it on its own layer. You use something like I'll just use this tool right here, right? The clone tool, and you'll go, oh yeah, I get rid of them just like that. But you'll notice, oh, I didn't set this to, I'll do it this way. I'll just work on a different layer here. You'll do something like this, right? To get rid of them, you'll try to get that thing to get them out there, or you'll grab the clone stamp and you'll go, no, the clone stamp is the one that I've learned to use. And you sample some good stuff and you're painting this here. And it's okay, but I don't know if you guys can see it on your monitors. I see this little light spot right there.
Yep.
You know, there's always something you're gonna see. And none of them are perfect, but this is about as close to perfect as you'll get, is working in frequency separation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my high frequency, and I'm going to give you this action. I'm going to click on that layer, and I'm going to get rid of my details that I don't want. I am going to grab right here my healing brush tool. I'm not going to use my spot healing. Spot healing says I choose it, or I let Photoshop determine how to fix it. I'm going to use my healing brush, which means I have to, look, I have to click where some good skin is, and then I'm going to just paint over here. If you notice, what's happening is I am only fixing the details. I am not affecting the color. So if I sample here and I paint over here, see how her eyebrows are still eyebrow color? It's because all I did was put this skin detail over that patch of color. If I want to get rid of this hair going through her eyebrow, then I select like the edge of her eyebrow, and then I just kind of paint her eyebrow texture through her eyebrow. I can take anything, like look at this hair goes all the way through here. I could get it if it's split through her eyeball. I'm seeing it up here a little bit. There's this weird thing going on there. And, you know, you'll get to where after a while, you'll just know what to get rid of, what not to get rid of. A lot of it is just getting rid of these little bright spots. And this is, like I said, this is more high-end retouching, but you can see how it's really easy to go through. It only takes a second to click around and go, I'm going to get rid of that little spot. Here's some kind of weird little thing going on. And it's all about one finger is on the keyboard and I'm hitting my Alt or Option on a Mac, and I'm sampling, I'm letting it go, and then I'm coloring it with my mouse. I'm sampling, I'm coloring with my mouse. I'm holding down Alt or Option, sampling, then I'm coloring it in, painting it with my mouse. So I just kind of go around and I go, oop, I don't like that hair there. Like you will never know these hairs were there. Like this is the coolest tool. This could be anything, you know, she could be holding a stick in front of her face and you can pretty much get rid of it. Like, see how nice that is? This right here, if I turn this off, you're going to notice in the color layer, there's not a huge difference, but there is a difference on this frequency layer. So what I'm going to do is even on this layer here, I'm you'll see me zooming in a lot is, see, I'm just going to color that edge. See how that edge softened up? Because I am taking away those areas of contrast within the details. But see how I just painted some of this white up here? So I'm going to Control Z, undo it, and I go, got a little carried away. And then a lot of times I kind of color these back in because it's the luminance of the pixel, how light and how dark the pixels are. It matters whether I sample this texture here and this texture here, probably are the same texture, but this is going to be darker texture. It's darker luminance. So, you know, I might have to select that if I want to carry that dark line through. But you can see how very quickly, even though it's taken me a while here because I'm talking through it, when I'm in editing mode, like I literally can just hit this button here, play the action, say okay, then I just jump in here and I go, get rid of that zit, that zit, that zit, you know, this little blemish here, and I go, okay, I'm done. So now I can turn this off and on. So I got to zoom in so you can see. So, you know, there's the before, there's the after. I'm not affecting how the color looks. So I'm not changing the shape of her face. It's still her face, everything. Low frequency is with color. There's a lot of times like when I do this, somebody like Brittany who does makeup a lot is going to go, yeah, this is really uneven. She's got this high cheekbone here, but she's missing stuff on this right-hand side or the left-hand side. Well, I can go to my low frequency, and this is where I use my clone stamp. And I don't use my opacity at 100%. I do it at 20%. All I have to do is hit 2 on my keyboard when I'm inside of a tool, and it'll lower my opacity to whatever that. If I hit 2, it'll go to 20. If I hit 6, it'll go to 60%. So I'm gonna go back to 20, or you can just, right, drop it down and move it around and take it somewhere around 20. So I'm gonna hit 20. I'm gonna go to some of these areas like here where I go, I want some of this darker makeup to fill in this little spot in her cheek. So what I will do is I will go sample, and then I'll drag, sample, drag, sample, drag, sample, drag. I'm not sampling and then just going drag, 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 drag. Every time I'm sampling and dragging. And then I come up here and I go, I'm gonna grab some of this lighter color. This is kind of like I'm got wet paint and I'm smearing it. But my opacity is only at 20%, so I'm just doing it really lightly because I can really make a mistake at 100%, or 20 just seems to be the amount. If I'm finding that there's like a weird, like see right here, there's a little batch of color. I'll zoom in, see how it's a little bit darker there. I'll hit my clone stamp tool. I'm not gonna go left and right if my shadows go left and right. I'm gonna work up and down because I want that gradient of light. So I'm going to go click, drag down, click, drag down. Some of it I'm going to drag up. And I'm going to try to find kind of this little, sometimes I'll grab this light and I'll drag it over a little bit, but then I'll drag back down to keep that light. So what I've done is I've done this a few times to where now it's not a big dark spot there. It's a nice gradient. So I'll pull up this a little bit. If I've got dark spots under the eyes, I'll push up some of this lighter color. There's always a weird thing that happens with noses. If you have a very harsh sun line, you can get rid of sun lines this way. So watch when I turn this back on. See how it blended that back out? It brought some more of that color over there. So you can see it from there to there. So there's the before, there's the after. So I can use those 2 layers in conjunction with each other to create beautiful portraits that way. I'm not going to show you today. One day we'll just do a thing on retouching, but I also use this dodge and burn method to, when I'm done, a lot of times it'll start flattening out my image a bit. So I need to add some contrast back into it. I need to dodge and burn, but I have an action that I use and it's a little complicated, but simple. And then that's where dodging and burning, this is where this comes in, right? Is my stylus. I do a lot of my editing with a mouse. I use a roller ball, but when I get into doing detail stuff, I'm going to pull out the stylus, and I'm using a Wacom tablet because the mouse is drawing, coloring with a potato. This is pen on paper. And a lot of people go, oh, I'm so terrible at masking. You're terrible at masking because you're using a potato to try to mask instead of using a pen that you know how to use. And that's what I left this in here for, was just to kind of give you some ideas of reasons to learn the stylus. And so let's say I needed to get rid of, there's 1,000 ways to do it, and there's an easy way to, but I'm just, for the sake of showing you how the stylus works. If you've not used one or you've tried it and you went, oh, this is terrible. I'm going to put a mask on this green line, right? A mask just hides what's on or shows what's on a layer. So white says, show me everything where white is. And anywhere I paint black, I'm going to make it disappear, right? The really basic stuff. For this class, usually I don't pretend everybody knows this stuff. But see, anywhere I paint black, see my mask over here, how it has that black, anywhere I painted black, this disappears. If I switch over here to white, I bring it back, right? Because I made my mask white in that spot. See, the black went away. So I'm gonna hit X, which changes my colors. Here's why you learn to use a stylist. So what happens is we say, okay, we want to mask this out. Right, and if we do it with our, I'm going to grab my mouse. We do this kind of thing, right? We color this, and a mouse has no pressure sensitivity. A mouse just says whatever size you made me, that's what size you need to do this. Where a stylus, I'm still sticking with my mouse, getting rid of all this stuff. A stylist, what I can do is I can come in here, and if I push hard, right? I push hard, let me hit X, there we go. It's as big as the circle is. But if I just touch it and I just move it around gently, it's really small, right? So what I'm going to do is, whoops, hit X, is now, like when I get to an edge of something, I'm just drawing with I'm sketching. I'm just going sketch, 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 right to there. If I want it to not quite get into the red, see, I just don't push very hard. I can hit R at any time, and I can rotate my canvas. If my hand doesn't like to paint left and right, I like to paint up and down. So I can just move my canvas around by I'm holding down the R, and as soon as I let it go, I'm back into this tool. So then I can come in here and, I could make it smaller if I want, right? Hit your bracket keys to make it smaller. So again, you can get so much more detailed with a stylus than you can ever with a mouse. And if I hit R, I can just say reset the view. So this is another great tip for learning how to, if you're doing a lot of masking, and masking is one of those things that you're just like, it frustrates me to death. Learn to use this. You'll stop being frustrated, because the harder you push, the wider it gets. So, you can set the pressure sensitivity to this thing to where when I set it on there, it is a pinpoint until I start putting any pressure on it. It even knows if my pen is at an angle. So there's brushes that are like calligraphy brushes that it knows that, oh, you're writing straight up and down, or it says, oh, your pen's at an angle at 40 degrees to the right, and it reacts that way. So it's really a cool thing. Get rid of that thing. So we're back to, any questions on frequency separation? This is one of those things that the first time you do it, you're just going to go like, I have no clue what he just did. You're like, I watched him and it looked really easy. But, here would be a simple, I don't even know. I'm just going to open this. I'm not even going to worry about image. This is going to be what most of our senior portraits look like. They look just like this. And we go, boy, how do we fix this stuff? Guess what? You go up here and you say, I'm in an 8-bit image. I say run. See how there's this dark spot right here? There's a dark spot there. That's when I'll kind of go, yeah, let's go a little heavier. Smash those together. And I say, okay. I open this up. I go to my high frequency. I hit J, which is my healing brush. See, it says J. If you ever wonder, like, how does he learn all those shortcuts? All you do is hold your mouse over something and it says lasso tool, L. That's the keyboard shortcut. You don't have to write them down. You just start memorizing them. Or you come up here and you say, you know, how do you create a new layer? You go new. Instead of doing this, you go, oh, Shift Control N. And you just start learning the ones that you use over and over again. So I know I hit J. I come in here. I'm using my bracket keys to make my brush bigger and smaller, right? Those are those squared off parentheses. And I make it about the size of my blemishes. And then I just go about going sample, paint, sample, paint, sample, paint. So what I'm doing is I'm putting this skin texture on this skin texture. I'm not messing with the color at all. So I can just quickly come in here, right? And a lot of times, like with senior portraits, I get most of it. You can overdo frequency separation and make people look too perfect. And then it looks, you know, you ever seen something that's overly done? They're like, I'm not a cover girl. I'm just a senior. The ethics, I always tell everybody, the ethics of Photoshop is, if it is permanent, leave it. If it is temporary, remove it, right? A blemish, a zit, that's temporary, take it out. A mole, leave it. That's permanent, you know. There is times where you're like, man, I don't know if that's a mole or a zit when you're working with seniors. And then you just make a judgment call. And if they're not too big or too pronounced, then take it out. Like this one right here, I'm sure that's a mole, but I see some color off to the side. So it almost looks like there might be a tiny freckle and then a zit off to the side of it. So I'm just gonna make a judgment call and hit J here and grab this. And I'm just gonna get rid of it. Getting rid of that hair that goes across there. And it's all just kind of about, you start learning where to sample from. That's going to be the hardest part if you start doing frequency separation, that you'll get lazy and you'll like sample, you'll go, oh, this is good skin here. And you'll start painting everywhere. And you'll start going, it's kind of looking a little bit weird. You'll notice when I do it, I'm sampling, I'm drawing, I'm sampling, I'm drawing, sample, coloring, sampling. And again, I'm not going to do this for every single image. I'm going to do it for the important images. Make this small. Watch this. That hair is just completely gone. There's no evidence that that hair was there because I just put texture on it. I don't want it to just end, so I'm going to do it down here into where it matches her hair and kind of blend it off that way. So if this was a really important picture, like, see how quickly we just did that? We went from that to that. Frequency separation. Look at that hair is just completely gone across her nose and mouth.
Mark, I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you get rid of that little eyelash piece that's in her eye with this?
Like right here?
Yeah.
I'm going to hit J. I'm going to make sure I'm working with a really small brush. And like, I'm going to sample her eye there and I'm going to carry that line through.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Awesome.
Just like that. And I'll sometimes, you know, if they've got really bad veins or something, I can get rid of the veins.
Okay.
I actually could go here and go, you know, let's give her a duplicate eyelash from that eyelash. You know, and I can add more eyelashes. It wouldn't be the way I would add eyelashes, but yes, you can do all those little things that as a photographer will annoy you. So that's skin, but check this out. Here's what's cool. Steve and I talked to Kimberly about this the other day. So this is not a great photo, but this one really emphasizes, just open it. These are straight out of camera. I didn't add anything to it. So it was raining that day, but you'll get stuff like this, right? Tight dress. So I'm seeing like the lines from, she had like frilly underwear or something on that had like bands, and then this thing across here, which I think is just a fold. The dress was just had a fold in it. How do I get rid of that? I'm gonna run this. I'm seeing this line here, so that's the only reason I'm kind of, oop, that's a little too much. I'm gonna say okay. Now I'm gonna go to the high pass. Most everything is done on the high pass on that one here. I'm gonna select this texture, and I'm gonna just go ahead and iron her dress for her since she forgot to. I may sample like this raindrop and paint it in there, so I have a raindrop painted in there, right? Because it just brought that texture. But you're saying right now, you're looking at it going, yeah, but I see this line. Yeah, because that's in this, the low frequency in the color. So that's where I take that technique where I grab my brush, my clone stamp, that 20%, and I click and I drag, click and drag. Some of it I go up, some of it I go down. You just kind of get in this weird rhythm of sample, drag, until I kind of get rid of that. I'm gonna actually push some of this dark in. So watch what happens now when I turn that back on. See how that's just gone? I could spend more time and make it even better, but you know, this little stuff down here, this is the kind of things, this image isn't that bad, but there was some images I did recently, and I was trying to find who it was that was wearing a dress like this, and you could see like all the lines from her underwear underneath. And then that's all you're looking at, because it's really annoying, right? So I just use this technique to come in here. You know, there's this little bump right here. Take that out of there. Maybe I don't want this seam. Maybe I go, which this was, you know, this was a, you know, a $15 dress from wherever that site is. And I just come through here and I go, I'm just going to get rid of that seam because it's really crummy. When I come up here, I can't sample here and paint here, right? Because I lose that little bit of shadow. So I'm just going to sample that shadow, drag it through, sample the shadow, sample here, kind of drag, make sure it's following through. So the cup, right, of this is terrible because it's, you know, again, it was a cheap dress. It's made for whatever size you throw it on, you know, person. So I'm going to sample some of this good fabric, and I'm just going to paint that, make sure I don't get to that edge. Right. And again, I'm not really spending a lot of time because I feel awkward having these odd pauses while I'm editing. So I'm just kind of doing as fast as I can. But you start seeing how, look at it, and then I go, whoop, I'm going to turn that off, go to my low frequency. I don't have to turn it off, but I prefer to, so I can see what's going on. Now I'm going to grab this. I'm going to paint it over that dark. And I'm going to get rid of that really dark, weird color. Turn that back on. See how it's getting better. There's still a little spot right here. A lot of times those require a little more work with this layer. It's not, it's right there. Even though I can't see it, it is there. But you think about, like, look at the seam, everything. I've turned it on and off. Like, we went from that to that.
Mm.
I've had to iron people's clothes for them. And this is the easiest way to iron clothes. You can take out anything. I mean, look at that. Take this seam out. You don't want the seam? Take the seam out.
No.
Because you saw how well it works for skin and it's for skin retouching, I also, right, we get senior girls that will like have a bra strap underneath a dress like this, and you're having this black bra strap. Use this method. Take the bra strap out. You're painting the texture of that skin onto there. You're getting rid of the color. It's flawless when it gets rid, the way it gets rid of things. You know, if I wanted to get rid of this right here, then all I would have to do is hit J, grab this. I'd start messing with this thing here and make sure, you know, I'm making sure her collarbone goes through. I go to this layer here. Kind of a sloppy way of doing it, but you can start seeing how, you know, I'd have to use a smaller brush. Oh, I'm on the wrong thing. That's what I'm like, what is this not doing anything? But you see how you can start getting rid of stuff. Just takes some work, but frequency separation, oh my goodness, getting wrinkles out, fixing weird things in clothing, fixing skin. And again, what happens is that if you go watch anybody's tutorial on frequency separation, it'll be a 40-minute long thing on frequency separation. 35 minutes of it will be about what's happening, the mechanics behind it, and what numbers you had to apply to create that action file. I don't really care. I don't care that I had to go to turn that layer to high pass and put in 555 and 27 on this layer. And, you know, I don't want to do that every time. I just use an action file. I don't care how it's happening. Just get me to the point where I have 2 layers and one I'm clone stamping and one I'm healing. I don't need 35 minutes of that. You know, it would actually be good at some point, you know, to do that so you understand it. Because when you understand it, then you start, it translates into other things on how to fix things. This where, oh, there's another one towards the end of the day. Let's just quickly go auto. Let's kind of go with, bring those shadows down a little bit. Let's add a little bit of shadow. It always likes to add. Let's zoom in on her face. Let's add a little bit of contrast. I'm going to take away some of that texture. Sometimes I'll hit auto just to see, no, just as shot. I can grab my eyedropper. Sometimes I can click around and go, ooh, there we go. I like, that looks closer, but it's not warm enough. So I'll make it a little warmer and I'll say open. And now I'm pulling it into Photoshop, but right, we can work on this picture for a little bit. And for most of us, we'd go, oh, it's pretty good. Looks pretty done. Which is what, you know, it could be if that's what you wanted to. And for a lot of times, for a lot of my images, even like I put in the gallery, that's about as much work as I put into it. But an image like this, I chose this one because if you put this image up, shame on you, right? Is she going to love this image?
Nope.
It's beautiful, right? Like great shape, great pose, great everything. So here, I'll zoom in a little bit here. If this was a picture of you, would you love this image? Women,
No.
women, would you put this image up? Would you say, this is me?
No.
Her tummy is off.
Her tummy's off, right? And there's nothing we could do. We were messing with the pose. We eventually had her bring this front arm down to cover her tummy a little bit. And we're talking about a girl that's got like, 8% body fat, right? But in this pose and the clothing and everything, she just, it's like loose skin. She's not, but these are those things where you go, fix that. Why are you not fixing that? And a lot of it's people go, I don't know how. You have what's called the liquefy tool under filter, right? This is your best friend for these kinds of things. I'm going to zoom in on the spot. I'm not going to work anything. You'll never see me work on things big. I'll always zoom in and work on the problem spots. So I'm going to grab my forward work tool. I cannot take this tool, and this is why people don't do such terrible at this tool. They're like, yep, I'm going to give her a tummy tuck, right? Well, guess what's happening to that line? That's not going to work. So I'm going to hit Control Z and I'm going to undo all that stuff. I know that anything I do here has to be has to be with that line. And if I do this, see how these pixels start stretching? I can't just grab and go, well, he said follow the line, right? No, I have to do this. I have to push it in a little bit. And then I got to grab this stuff back here and push that over a little bit. And I just kind of have to work this stuff together a little bit out of a time so that you can't tell where all this stuff happened at. I can't go up with this because my pixels start stretching up. I've got to stay with those lines, and I'm always changing the size of my brush. Sometimes I'm even back here and I'm pulling. I'm not pushing them. I'm pulling the pixels because they'll get bunched up. And I'll start pushing all this stuff right here. Some of this stuff I'll pull forward. And most times with the healing brush, I've got to heal it, or this liquefy tool, I'll have to liquefy like 3 times because I'll do that much and I'll say, okay. And I'll go, okay, let's go before, after, whoops. Whoop, I got hit my before, after, and I'll go, okay, I'm making really good progress. And that might even be enough. But if it's not, then I'll go back into it. I won't try to do it all in one pass. This is how you get caught, is trying to do too much. Whoop. So we'll back out. And maybe this time I'm going to go with a really big brush or forward warp tool. And I'm just going to push kind of a bigger chunk. All the pixels are getting stretched. Pull that down. There we go. So now I have fixed that. You know how I'm going to fix all this stuff here? Frequency separation. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go in my high pass. You'll start seeing like frequency separation is the killer technique. Start fixing this stuff here. I might even frequency separate some of these pixels that got stretched. I might grab this line, make my tool a little smaller, paint my line in there a little bit more. I'm going to pull my low frequency, my color layer, with my clone stamp at 20%. And I'm going to lighten those spots up a bit. Turn that back on. Think she's going to like that a lot better.
Mhm.
You know, so those are those weird things that you have to be aware of, you know, that, like I said, don't keep this from, you know, fix that little thing. Like this would be an image I'm like, I'm proud to show her this. But if I was going this, I want this done. I want it finished. I might go a little bit deeper, but just be aware, again, look at things with a more critical eye of like, if that was me, because that's our biggest problem, especially guys. We look and we're like, she looks beautiful. It's done to me. But you know what? There's a good chance I'd send this to her and she'd go, not a big fan. And I don't even know why. And she'll never tell me why, but you know, maybe it's these lines on her neck. Maybe she's like really self-conscious about lines on her neck. Well, frequency separation, right? I can fix that really simple. I just got to work with a smaller brush here and find spots that are, you know, that don't have that line. How many times have you had your favorite shot of your lifetime only to go, all I see is that big wrinkle in the dress. Why didn't they iron the dress? I can't figure out how to do it. Frequency separation will do that. You know, oh, I wished I hadn't had her turn her neck around, but that was the only way I could get that pose because now I have all these lines in her neck. So look at that. I got rid of all the lines in her neck. Because they were little bumps, right? Because it creates folds, there's highlights. So that's why, you know, it looks a little bit bright there. Well, I can always go to my color layer and I can just kind of play with those colors. To do that. So this is what I mean. Again, what I said in the beginning, it's all about techniques. You may go, no, I would leave those, or I would do it this way. I would, good. But we're all going to use the same techniques to figure things out, like contrast and, you know, how much of it. You might like more. You might like, you know, colors to be different. So let's see. I said I was talking to you about gradient mapping, because here's another problem. See how her face is really light? Her abs are very kind of reddish, darker, ankles very dark. So what I'll use a lot of times is what's called a gradient map. And so at the bottom of your layers panel, you got this little yin and yang sign, right? These are all your adjustment layers. There's one called gradient map. And here's what you need to know about a gradient map. Whatever it happens, this is the most important step. You must change your blending mode for your layer. See, it says normal. You must change it to soft light. So that's the thing you have to know to do. Now you sit there and you go, because this just picked whatever random color I was playing with Photoshop earlier. It just remembers my last gradient. But I'm going to click on my gradient map now. I just clicked on it and this thing pops up. You have all of these. See, it says basic, blues, purples, pinks, and some of them work. I don't use them because I've gone and you just go online and you search free gradient maps, Photoshop, and people have made gradient maps. Like this guy right here, Skin Tones by J. Jung Jim. You'll see these pop up all the time. Look at all of these gradient maps this guy had made for different skin tones. Watch what happens when I click on some of them. What it did is it said, see this color on the left here? It said that my blacks, my darks are going to be mapped to this color. Their luminance, how light and how dark they are, is going to be the same, but it says my hue and saturation for those pixels that are completely black are going to be this color. The ones that are pure white are going to be this color. And I could put different points. Here's what my mids tones are going to look like, that color. So this guy's created these maps. So you can see it gave like this skin tone color to the black part of inside of her hair here, but it brought all her skin into, you know, different looks. So I can kind of click around, or I can select one. I just use my arrow key and I just toggle through them until I really find one that I really like. Notice how her face, her abs, everything's closer to the same. Because their colors, their hue and saturations are the same. Their luminance remained whatever it was before, right? Pixels have 3 parts. Every pixel has a luminance value, which means how light and how dark it is, a color value, what color it is, and then the hue, which is what color, and then the saturation, how much of that hue. So I'm only messing with two of them, hue and saturation, and I'm leaving the luminance value alone with a gradient map. So like, how cool is that? I can hit OK, but again, techniques. You've got to get your brain in Photoshop wrapped around the fact that overdo everything, pull it back. There's what I mean. It's on its own layer, that gradient map, right? Everything I just did, I let it do its thing. Then I'm going to come back here and I'm just going to lower the opacity. I don't have to apply it 100%. I just apply it a little bit, 37%, maybe 40%. I just kind of play with it, and then I can turn it off and on, and I can go before, after, and I go, yeah, that's kind of closer. It gets things in this range. And if you go, yeah, I like what it did to her, but I don't like what it did to the color of her jogging suit. Well, then you're going to have to, that's when you have to get good with masks. This mask is pure white. Guess what? If I go Control or Command I on a Mac, it inverts it and it turns it into a black mask, which says, don't let me see anything on that layer. So then I'll take a white brush and I will start painting and say, okay, well, only apply it to her face. Only apply it to down here to her abs. Only apply it to her ankle. You know, obviously I'd have to do a lot better job than I'm doing, but you can start seeing how, you know, maybe I want it onto her hair. I kind of like what it did there. So yeah, now you can see my little bits of paint. If I hold down my Shift key and whoops, that turns it off. That selects it. I never do this, so. There we go. If I hold down my Alt or Option key and I click on the mask, it shows me where I painted white. And then I click it again. Little stupid things in Photoshop. You ever find where you don't see your brush anymore and you just see crosshairs? And you're like, I don't see the size of my brush. I only see these X. That just means your cap locks is on. Take the cap locks off and you get your brush back. It still works, but so. And then maybe I go, well, now that I've only applied it to her face, you know, then maybe I do want to make it a little bit brighter. So gradient maps will pull everything into that same range of color because you've mapped the color. There's so many cool gradient maps out there. So I'll put another gradient map layer over this. I'm going to set my blending mode to soft light. I'm going to click on my gradient map. I love these gradients right here. I use these all the time. I'll click on one and then I'll just start toggling through them. Like I said, I really like blues. So I kind of like how it tints it blue a little bit. And I like this one usually a lot too. One of these, I either like that one or this one a lot. This one, you're going to look at it and go, yeah, I kind of like this one better just because you're seeing a lot of weirdness going on. I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to back my opacity off. So you can start seeing how, you know, it's a very subtle, I backed it all the way off, didn't I? It's a very subtle effect of, you know, mapping those colors. And a lot of times it'll bring details out because it brightens things, because it changes, it leaves the luminance, but changes the color values of those really dark pixels. So that's gradient map. What you just got to know is gradient map, set it to blend mode to soft light. That's what you need to know. And like I said, you have all these already built into it. Like here's grays. Let's just click on a gray one. These come with Photoshop. If you have Photoshop, you have all these. You know, maybe you go, no, I want this to be a purple thing. Toggle through them, see what you like. A lot of weird ones in here. Here's some red ones that they've made. There's pastels. But again, you know, a lot of times you'll look at it and you'll go, you know, I don't like this, but maybe it's something I'm trying to do. It's Easter time. I always know I can say, okay, and I can back down how much of that effect by the opacity. So maybe I go, no, it needs to have this look. I also, because it's on its own layer, I can throw it away because I say I don't like it. I don't like that, what that one did. And I go, okay, that's my other point. So that's gradient maps. Any questions? Just go search them and search for free ones and install them. Oh, that's what I probably should tell you. And you can, go to PixImperfect and say, install gradient maps, and he'll show you how to do it, but they're really easy. You go gradient map. I've downloaded a bunch of gradient maps. So I say import, and it'll go to, I'll go find them on my downloads, and I'll go, okay, there's some in here. It'll double click on it, and I'll say load. And next thing you know, I'll have down at the bottom a new thing called whatever the name of those gradient maps are. So see, I'm always like finding ones that I go, oh, this might be kind of cool. And I'll grab, see how it's doing nothing. It's looking weird because I was showing you how to do this, but it's not, it's set to normal, not soft light. This is going to be the biggest learning curve is you're going to go, oh, I put a gradient map, and you're going to come here and you're going to start playing with these and go, wow, these look terrible. You just say cancel, make sure it's set to soft light. Then you come over here and, and these ones, you can't really go, you can't judge a gradient by the color. You look at this and you go, this one's going to make everything blue. Well, it kind of made it blue, but it's keeping the skin tones intact a little bit. So there's always different ones. So let's throw that away. The other one is, this is a fast way to, I'm just showing you a couple things, fast way to edit. A lot of people don't know this exists inside of Photoshop. I believe you have lookup tables in Lightroom too now. But a lot of times this is what people will call styles or something. But right here it says color lookup. So it brings up this weird thing that says a 3D LUT. And basically this is applying somebody's recipe to your image. But it's really fun to kind of go through these. I hit this drop down. I don't have to change any blending mode, and I'll say 2-strip look. And now I can just use my toggle. Since I haven't touched anything else, I can just toggle through with my arrow keys and see what each one of these do. And I go, oh, that's kind of interesting. It would be great if it didn't affect the blue, right? But we can fix that. So I can just toggle through all of these things. And a lot of them are different film styles. You start here, Fuji, F125, or Kodak looks. And you can go through these things. And these are a fast way to stylize an image. Like one of them grabbed me. That one, it's funny. You'll see one that'll grab you. You'll go, that looked good. And then you'll look at something like that looks bad. And then you'll go, no, I like the other one before. And then you go back to it and go, ooh, why did I like it? So a lot of times it takes a few times to kind of toggling through. You find ones you like. I kind of like that. And again, it's on its own layer. You don't have to accept it that heavy. You can, roll it back a little bit if you want to. You can make adjustments. You can not just put one color lookup, you can put 5 color lookup tables if you want it. And so here's one reason I will say you use multiple color lookups. So maybe in this image where I go, yeah, I want, this background to be different than her skin or something. There's different parts I'll show you. I'll go color lookup, and I might go to something like crisp warm, and I go, ooh, I like those warm tones in the highlights. So what I'm going to do is, and again, some of this stuff, it's not advanced, like you can't figure it out, but you'll just never remember it. So, but I double click on a layer, and that brings up, as long as I don't click on the words or the icons, it'll bring up this layer style panel. And this is where, people put in for text, drop shadows and all kinds of things like that. But a lot of people don't know this down here. It's called blend if. And blend if, I'm working on my underlying layer. I'm saying only, or I start saying, do not apply it to the lights by sliding that light slider in. Or I can say, don't apply it to the dark. So start removing it from the dark pixels. But I also can hold down Alt or Option on a Mac, and I can grab and split these, and which is what you'll want to do every time. I'll drag this down. Actually, I want to do this because I only want it to apply it to the light. Yeah, that's the right way. So I'll start dragging this until I see it not being on the dark parts of the pixel. So I kind of move this back and forth. This is the distance between these two is the feather of how much it's feathering, applying it. And so I might say, okay. And now you can see how I have kind of given that warm look to the highlights, but not so much to the shadows, because I might say color lookup. Let's see, there was something in here that I might want to pop through and go, yeah, I want more of the shadows to look like whatever this one is. I'm going to double click on it and I'm going to do just the opposite. I don't want it to apply to the light pixels, only to the dark pixels. So I'm saying blend it. If it's light, don't apply it. If this is a hard one for me always to get my head wrapped around. And you just, whether I'm working with this layer or the underlying and which one moves it, just start moving the sliders around until you go, yeah, I'm trying to take it off of that. And that's the slider to use. I'm going to say, okay. And so you can see that I applied that to the dark pixels. You can really see it, weird stuff happening down there. But lookup tables are a fast way to create different looks. You can create your own lookup tables that you want to apply to a whole bunch of images. You know, maybe I come in here. Yes.
Okay, so let's just say I love this look. I love everything we've done so far, but I
Yeah.
have 4 pictures from this exact location that I want to apply this whole process that we've gone through with the colors.
Okay.
How do I take this exact formula and apply it to those other 4?
Okay. I'm not going to show you the one way is to create another lookup table that uses all of these, but because you're probably never going to do it again. You're only going to do it to those 4 images. Let's go and let's say we're bringing up this image here. I'm going to say apply the previous settings so it looks just like the last one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Control or Command. Actually, I'm going to hold down my Shift key and I'm going to select all of these colors, right?
Okay.
I'm going to actually do the gradient map too. I'll show you here in a second what's going on. I can just now grab these and drag them up to this tab. And when that picture pops up, I drag down and I let it go and that will apply it.
That right there
Oh,
is going to save me a ton of time.
But this is the part that people have trouble with. They'll watch me do this and they're like, I can't ever get it to go, because they're like, I drug it over and I drug it and I dropped it there. Well, guess what? It didn't do anything. You have to drag them to the tab, wait till it pops up, drag it down, and then let it go. You see how this mask was on there still? Whoops. I can hold down my Shift key and click on the mask, which turns the mask off. It's just because then I'd have to remask it. Does that make sense? So what I'll do is see how these white spots are, because that's where her face was on the other one. All I have to do is paint that all in black. So I can take a black brush, and I can paint those spots, or I can just go Alt Delete, which says fill with black, right? That's just filling. Those are just shortcuts. It's somewhere up here. I don't even know where most of these are anymore, because I've just learned right here, fill, well, Shift 5, but Control Delete or Command Delete fills with your background color. Alt Delete or Option Delete fills something in with your other color. If one doesn't work, use the other. So
Okay,
now,
so Mark,
Go ahead.
For just for recap, so you would basically push shift on all 4 of those things.
Yep, I'd select them all.
Okay, by
Okay.
shifting, you're saying?
So yeah, so I click on one of them, I hold down shift, and then I click on the last one. That selects them
Fantastic.
all.
Okay.
Or, or I can hold down my Alt or my Control or Command button. I can click them all one at a time.
Okay.
So one of the other things you can do is you can take these layers and put them in a group, which is Control or Command G, or you can come up here and say, where does it say it? Create a group.
New group
New group, yeah. Where do you see new group? Right there,
up
new
the next
group.
box.
Boop. And I can say, okay. And it puts them all on their own layer. But I didn't have them selected. So if I go have them selected, I go Control G. See, they're all there. They're just put into a group in like their own. So now I can just drag that group over and I go here and I drop it on there. And I can open this up when I want to work on it. See, like I want to fill that in. So now all I have to do if I want to make it identical is zoom in, go to my gradient map, grab my brush. And now, that was the only thing I did different was I took it off of her face. I took that part off of her abs. I took that part off of there. But yeah, so now I've got, 2 images that have the identical stuff happening to them color-wise. Yeah, so at any point you can drag, anything to another image. I can grab this background image and I can drag it to this other image and, and drop it on. And now it's there in its own layer on that other image. If I hold down my shift key, it'll put it identically to where it was in the other image, if that makes sense too. But so, maybe I'm doing some kind of weird
Oops.
70s, she's got some outer body experience happening or something. Yeah, so there's gradient maps, lookup tables. I showed you any questions now. Those are the things I want to just cover today. And we can do another time Zoom call where we actually just talk about frequency separation. There's a lot to it, but it doesn't have to be scary. And again, when I put it in a group, I can lower the opacity now of the entire group as well. So I really can control things well. Anything you do in Photoshop, man, lower the opacity on it, whatever you did to it, kind of blend it together. You'll never hear somebody go like, oh, you didn't Photoshop it enough, but you will hear people go, oh, you over Photoshopped something. So don't over Photoshop, just again, learn those blending tools. So any questions? Wow, I got Ken Fleming here. I just looked over. He was my friend from high school. He lives in Nashville. And he is an amazing artist. So did we answer a lot of those questions, Kim? Hello? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. I know it disappeared on me and I was like, where'd it go? No, absolutely. I really appreciate this. And like, even just some of the other, like the thing that you just taught me, I can't tell you how many times I've been like, oh my gosh, now I've got to go back through every single picture and apply this process. So yeah, it was great.
Good. I was trying to figure out why I brought this one in. And again, if you just, again, don't think of Photoshop as a recipe book. You'll get so frustrated trying to copy somebody else's recipe. Learn techniques. Tons of techniques to learn.
Mark, on this picture, just right now that you're showing,
yes,
all those bright spots on the ground, would you get rid of those?
Most of them I wouldn't. Again, remember when we talked about in our workshop about gifts, and one of the gifts is that you find at a location is repetitive patterns. If repetitive patterns do not draw your eye away from the subject, most times, a spot will pull your eye away. But because this is almost a repetitive pattern of these light spots down the street, they're not so bad.
Yeah.
This one, yes, I probably would get rid of. And this one, I probably would not do frequency separation in. I probably would just clone stamp that because it's such a heavy texture. You can hide things within heavy textures that you can't really hide with skin textures. I can be very heavy-handed correcting the concrete. And like the little bits of trash, I'm not worried about it. But if I was putting this in some kind of competition, you bet I'd go in there and I'd get rid of every piece of trash. And I think one of the reasons I brought this one up was I was going to use this as that example of, you know, every time we do a workshop, everybody says, I'm getting blinkies on the back of my camera, right? Where it says there's no texture in the sky. I've blown out my highlights and they can't get past it. They're just like, oh my goodness, I just can't take this picture because the sky has no texture or no detail. Well, it's got no detail. The only way, right, we can fix that is we get more light on the subject. The subject has much light on the subject as there is on the sky if you want the sky and subject to have their natural values. But if we don't have enough light, then we're kind of stuck. But this one, again, this is what I love about our new cameras, right? There's so much dynamic range. I can pull back some of that blue. Oh, what I want to show you with this one was, you guys can do this in Lightroom. Color mixer. There was two things. I'm glad I stared at this for a minute trying to figure out why did I put it in there to select. So there's not a lot of blue, right? There's no blue in her outfit here. So I know now that if I move what they call aqua, which is more like the cyan or the blues, see the sky? I actually can add blue to the sky if you're that worried. If you're like, yeah, but I want my sky to be blue. Well, I can mess around with this. I can't overdo it because obviously her hair, the way light bends around things, has created this lighter halo. So it's going to eventually just turn those whites into this blue. So I got to back things off to where I can live with it. But, you know, you can add blues that way. This is not one that's terrible, but right here, they added an orange slider. This is called your HSL adjustments. Remember earlier I said, this is the 3 parts of the pixel. Hue, what color it is. So I can say my red pixels, what hue, what color do I want them to be? Saturation is how much of that color. And then luminance is how light or how dark those pixels are going to be. So that's what HSL, just whenever you see HSL, go, oh, that's right. That's the 3 parts of the pixel. I wanted to do this because they added the orange slider. My red got all jacked up. You ever get skin that looks very weird or ruddy? And your brain says, ooh, that's red. There's too much red in that image. And for years, everybody has tried to adjust skin by using a red slider. But last year, they finally gave us this orange slider, and you will find that almost all of your skin tones are in that slider right there. And so a lot of times, let's see if I even have an image in here that's got skin that's actually more red. Here we go. Let's make sure this is not one that custom. Let's see, as shot. Actually, I'll just go here and say reset to the default. We'll say auto. And I'm going to jack this up a little bit more and say open. So a lot of times we'll get skin that looks a lot more like this. And you're like, I just don't know what to do with that skin tone. There's 1,000 ways to do it. But one of the best ways to fix that is as I opened it, sorry, is inside of Camera Raw. You also have it in Lightroom, is go to your HSL slider or your color mixer and just back those oranges off a little bit. And a lot of times when you back them off, don't back them off too much, like back them off to where you think it is pretty good and then bring it back. I always tell everybody, even in Photoshop, when you add something in Photoshop, like we were just talking about, the best way to do it when you're learning is to lower the opacity to 0 and then start adding that effect. Because the way our brains work is our brains start seeing something taken away and we go, oh, I want it back, and we stop. And we'll only lower the opacity to like 80% because we'll go, oh, I'm losing the effect. If you start at 0 and you start adding it at like 20, 30%, you're like, ooh, that's making a huge difference. And by 50, you're like, okay, that's plenty. 50% opacity versus 80% opacity is going to look so much more natural. It's going to be so much better that way. So the orange, that's why I said, if you bring it down, you're going to go, oh, good, all the oranges is gone. No, bring the orange back a little bit and kind of figure out where your brain says, okay, I can live with that. You know, maybe right there somewhere. Then if you also, when I lowered that orange, I started going, but now it's kind of getting this almost purple quality to it. Well, I can play with the hue. If that bothers me too much, I can make it more purple, more to the yellow side, you know, and maybe I can save it. This is a big one to fixing skin is that orange slider though. It's your best friend these days. I'm so happy they put it in.
So Mark,
Yes.
so this is a good kind of picture example, because frequently we love to shoot on brick walls, but we get the color will bounce back from the wall onto the skin tone. And it's so frustrating because I want it off the skin tone, but not off the wall.
Yep.
How would you go about like just removing it from the because you do the slider and then it's removing, like I can't remove the red because now it's removing it from the wall, but I don't want it. Do you know what I mean?
Yep. So if you're finding that it is really messing things up, then you can open something up inside of Photoshop. It says filter. You have the Camera Raw filter. So I could, but I'm going to always work on it. I'm going to copy that layer and then I'm going to say filter, Camera Raw filter. So I have the same thing I'm working in, you know, and maybe now I'm going like, man, I want that wall to be much more yellow. And I'm going, it was like that color yellow. And maybe I go into my luminance and say it was super bright, or I can say, okay, so now I've applied it to everything. This is my mask is going to be my best friend, right? I'm going to put a mask on there. It's a white mask. I'm going to grab a black brush and I'm going to say, okay, don't apply it to her, right? And I'm going to mask her off. Anywhere I paint with black, right? I'm not going to see it. The beauty too of the mask, a lot of people don't know this, is that it has its own density slider, which is the opacity of, this is a black brush. I can actually, it's how dense I want this black to be. See, it says density. I'm basically making it into gray. So I can actually take it off where I'm like, oh, I actually kind of like what it did a little bit to her skin. I can lower the density and see how my mask isn't totally black now. Now I move up, it's black. I move it down here to 70%, it turned gray. So it's like I painted with gray because a mask works in grayscale. Does that make sense? Then I don't have to apply it to that wall.
On an image like this,
Yeah.
How precise are you going to worry about your mask?
I'm not. And if I'm
Just
really
use something
worried,
soft.
right next to, here's what I will do. Again, there's so many like little things in Photoshop over the years you learn. Next to the bracket keys is the backslash. If I hit a backslash while I have the mask selected, anywhere that I have painted my mask with black, it's going to turn red. I hit it again, it goes away. So maybe I do this, and there's a lot of times where I'll grab my mask again, grab my brush, hit X, and I'll go, ooh, I spilled on that wall. And I'll fix my mask. And I'll go, ooh, I didn't. I'll hit X to change it to black, and I'll, paint there. Then I can actually be a little bit better at it. In dark spots, you'll miss it because you'll be like, no, I thought I masked all that. By hitting it red, you'll see where you didn't mask. Hit X, right, to change, right? The X is just like hitting this little button here. I'll go back through. I'm not worried on this image just because the skin tone, so I'll hit my backslash, my skin tone and the wall are kind of in that same color family, the yellow and that skin tone. So you're not going to really see it. But like if this was I don't know, a super rich blue wall or something, I would definitely see the edges between her, what I did to her skin versus, this yellows. So I'd have to be a little more precise. There is a tool that does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. If you're like, I want to select her and only fill her in, I can go select subject, and Photoshop does a great job on its own picking out the subject. Right? And then I can just click on my mask and go, grab a brush, and I can just fill her in. Or I can go Alt Delete, which just is the fill command, and I filled everything inside that. Control D deselects it. So a lot of times I will use that tool, just that select subject. It does a great job now. And then I just got to fix the little things it misses, but like something like this, it's not going to miss. So. Curves, just since we're all still kind of hanging on here. Fast way, I have a better way of dodging and burning, but if you want to do a quick way to add contrast, you guys know how this works, a curve, right? You pull down here, this represents the tones in your images. And classically, you're putting an S curve into an image to give it lots of contrast. So you're boosting the highlights, you're bringing down the darks in the image, the blacks in the image. But there's an easier way of kind of finding things. And there's this little button right here, which is a scrubby slider. If I click on it, now watch my line here on my curve. Wherever my eyedropper is touching, it's telling me that's where it's at on that curve. And at any point, like I can find my highlights and I can click. And now I can, if I drag down while I'm still clicking, it'll drag it down from that point. Or I can drag up and go, ooh, I want my highlights to be about that bright. And then I'll go down here and I'll find, a darker part of her skin and go, well, there's my darker tones. I'm going to pull those down. And now I've created an S curve based on her skin specifically. And you're going to go, well, that did a weird thing. This is, again, technique. In Photoshop, anytime I do anything to a pixel, I'm doing it to the hue, the saturation, and the luminance. I don't want to mess with the colors when I'm putting a curve in. I'm trying to lighten and darken pixels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to only play with the luminance part of the pixel. So there's a blending mode, says normal. Down here it says luminosity. This says only apply what you're doing on this layer to the luminance value of the pixel. Don't mess with the color. So my colors don't go wonky. It only messes with how light and how dark those pixels are. So suddenly, man, I got a ton of contrast by doing that. And again, I can back it off by using the opacity of that. So. I get excited, so I can just keep throwing tips and all kinds of things out there, but it's probably 11 o'clock. We said we'd be done by 11. So any questions?
I thought that was PM.
Yeah. It can be. It's fun to play with. But try it. Just try it. I'm going to send you, I'll put on there the link for frequency separation. Load up that action and play with it. If for nothing else, I mean, the conversation started with, in the van the other day with Kimberly, and she's like, I got to know this. So today was really about getting you feeling good about frequency separation, what it does. Follow Dinesh on Pix Imperfect. Can't tell you enough how great this kid is as a teacher. And there's other ones out there. Flern is a good one, but I tell you, I have not found anybody that teaches as well as Pix Imperfect.
He
Hey,
is
Mark?
great.
Yes.
Mark, can you spell Dinesh? How did you say that?
Well, no, you just look up Pix Imperfect.
Oh, okay.
Piximperfect. Pix Imperfect. And follow him on YouTube. And he's got so many videos that I guarantee you, like, there's nothing that you're going to run into that you're like how do I fix, the lip color? I guarantee you could go on his channel and type in lip color, and he's probably got a tutorial on changing lip color, that is related to others. And so Photoshop's a journey. You can't take a class and learn Photoshop. You have to learn it as you need it. You have to go, ooh, I got to learn how to do better retouching. And so you start learning frequency separation. Then you start going, ooh, I need how to make better digital makeup, or I need to fix ruddy skin. You start fixing those things, and you start learning more and more and more. And then it's crazy because all of a sudden somebody goes, here's a picture of an automobile. And you're going, how do I fix it? And you're like, oh, frequency separation. Or you go, ooh, I can see a big light in the car. Yeah, you're going, oh yeah, I just used that same technique I used to remove this object. And you just start using techniques, just like in cooking, to create a masterpiece. And there's never an answer. Like, that's just, this is the way to do it. We always say in Photoshop, there's not the right way, but there are definitely faster ways usually to do things.
So do you ever go bridge jumping up off Shasta anymore?
I do not, Ken, no. And it is like, the lake is so low right now.
Yeah, I've seen pictures.
Next week, we're shooting pictures at a camp for Scotty Alexander and Jeff Brashears for Elevate Camp, a houseboat camp out on the McLeod arm of the lake. And so it'll be
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'll tell everybody hi.
Yeah, you bet. Love watching your work.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah, no, it's great stuff.
Yeah, I do Photoshop, but on the art side. So it's kind of fun to see you doing things in a similar fashion, but in a different way than I do it. So.
Yep. So do you do a lot of it in Photoshop, or using Illustrator?
I actually use Sketchbook Pro.
Okay.
And then I go into Photoshop and kind of clean it up. It's got some good tools, but it's somewhat basic, limited. I've tried drawing in Photoshop before, and it just doesn't work for me.
Okay.
I can't wrap my head around it.
Yeah, because it's all math. It's all vector.
Yeah, a lot of illustrators do.
Yep.
And they go in and customize their brushes and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, if I had the time, I probably could, but
yeah.
Job and everything.
Yeah, exactly. Tim, you don't paint any, have you painted much digitally? No. So Tim's a pretty famous artist. He's done everything from not Lands End, but L.O. Bean catalogs to, stuff hanging in big important buildings, but it's all brush and canvas.
Yeah, I admire that.
Yeah. So, but it's kind of cool. I've been playing around with the paint brushes in Photoshop lately. Those wet brushes, you take a photo and then you start painting on it, and it's just amazing what it'll do. and it's how it just reacts like a brush. So awesome. Okay. Well, it's good to see everybody today.
Yeah, it was good, Mark. Thank you.
Pretty awesome. You
Thanks.
answered a lot of questions I didn't even have to ask you.
Good.
Right?
Brittany, great photo the other day.
Yeah, and the red dress.
Yeah,
Thank
your little, what you call your magnum opus. That's
That is, I knew it was one of those instances that we've all had as photographers where within the millisecond of me clicking the shutter, I knew that I had it. And I could not stop thinking about that one image for 12 hours until I could edit it. But now I'm mad because I want to go back and re-edit it with the frequency separation, because I'm like, shoot, I don't think I did it a good enough justice, because I feel like I can really emphasize it even more. And so and that's part of a whole aspect of photography of you've shown your work, but you want to make a change. Do you remove it? Do you upload it again saying that you've changed it? Like there's this whole, like, what do you do? Like, oh, like once it's out there, is that it? Do you make changes? Do you leave it as, do you say that you've changed it? Or do you just like,
change it. Just change it. Fix it.
I think I'll go back and do a second edit and see if I can even make it better. But for me, just the composition for me, I loved it.
Yeah.
But I still think that the color can be adjusted a bit.
Yeah, and see, like you had that, the dress and those poppies are close to the same color. You throw a gradient map on there and you can map those reds and oranges to the same color. And
Yes.
suddenly it'll look like, oh my goodness, how did you find a field that the dress and the poppies were identical?
Yeah. So
Right now they're similar, but they're going to be like spot on.
and it was hard because in Lightroom, you're using your adjustment. Like I'm using like trying to get the red down, but then the orange up, because the poppies are a little bit more orangey, not full California poppies, but they're not quite this. So I'm kept adjusting